To answer the question, what is personal branding and why is it important? I'm going to share with you a graphic diagram that's going to change your life. Promise. So quick story about how I figured this out, what I'm going to share with you. I was working with a PR company in Miami. I was supporting them in branding themselves. Now, I'm going to talk about branding and then I'm going to apply what I'm teaching to personal branding. So with these people, I was helping them grow their business. And what I realized very quickly after looking at their financials was that they weren't charging enough money for their services. And that's why they were struggling. They were a great company. They were delivering massive value in the PR space to their clients, but they were struggling to make ends meet. And I realized that the problem was that their prices were too low and they didn't realize that they had a very unique thing that they could charge a lot more money for. So what I did was I tried to tell them to raise their prices. I tried to explain that they had this really unique thing that they could brand around and make a lot more money, but they just weren't getting it. And so I was kind of stuck. I wasn't sure what to do and how to get through to them. And one day I was about to go meet with them and I walked into my closet and I had an aha moment. I thought, what will these PR ladies understand, right? They'll understand shoes. So I walked into my closet and I pulled out all of my shoes, a range of shoes from the lowest price point, the dingiest shoes I had, all the way to my superstar stiletto pair of Christian Louboutins. So I brought all these in a big old bag and I got to the meeting. I opened my bag and I said, before we get to work on strategy today, let's play a game. And what I did was I drew this on the board, the exact same thing I'm going to share with you. So I drew what's called a price value matrix. Price value matrix where value is on the y-axis and price is here on the x-axis. So of course this is low value, and when I talk about value, I'm really referring to perceived value. And so here's low perceived value and here is high perceived value. Now I promise this is relevant to personal branding. Keep listening, I promise it'll make sense. And over here is low price and over here is high price. So as I was taking the shoes out of my bag, we started plotting the shoes on the price value matrix. So over here, we have shoes that would be low price and high value. Here we have shoes that are high price, high value. Here we have shoes that are low price and low value. And here is where we would find shoes that are low value and high price. All right, so I started taking shoes out. The first pair of shoes that I pulled out of my bag of goodies was a pair of Crocs. So pulled out a pair of Crocs. I asked the people in the room, who here has a pair of Crocs? A few hands went up. And I said, well, do you perceive them as having low value or high value? And everybody agreed, except for one person, that they were high value but low price. Now that one person warned me that if I was single, that I should probably get rid of any Crocs that I had, but that's a separate story. So we plotted the Crocs around here. We said, all right, these Crocs, they cost about $30-35, but they come in handy all the time. Like you can get them wet, you can walk through rivers with them, you can throw them on when you just need to go to the supermarket. I wear my Crocs all the time. So low price point, high value. Next pair of shoes I brought out of my bag generated oohs and ahs. They were a pair of Betsy Johnsons. They were plaid with a T-strap, high heel platform, gorgeous shoes. They cost me about $200 and they were high value because they were one of the most comfortable high-heeled shoes I'd ever worn. And plus the ladies in the room loved them too. So we decided that those shoes were fairly high value and fairly high price. So we put them here and we put Betsy Johnson. Next pair of shoes I pulled out, pair of Nikes. I wore them every other day to play tennis. These were my, athletic shoes that I wore all the time and I loved. And a lot of people in the room had Nikes. We all agreed they were considered high value and sort of a medium-ish price point. They were lower than the Betsy Johnsons. They were higher than the Crocs. So we put my Nikes here. Then I pulled out a pair of ugly old flip-flops that had a no-name brand that I bought one day when I was on my way to a Dave Matthews concert, and it started to rain and I didn't want to ruin my nicer shoes. So I ducked into a Walmart and I pulled out this pair of kind of crappy flip-flops. So those, we all agreed, were pretty much low value and low price. So we'll call these the Dave flip-flops. All right. Now, another pair of shoes that I pulled out of my bag were a pair of Keds. Now, I hardly ever wore my Keds, but there was a time when I loved them. So as a group, we decided the Keds were lower value than the Crocs and a little bit around the same price point. So we put these over here. So these are Keds, right? Now, we could go on and on and on and fill, but you're starting to see what's happening over here, right? Now, the last pair of shoes I pulled out of my bag, of course, were my Christian Louboutins. And for those of you ladies who know about Christian Louboutins, you know I have to pull out my red marker in order to put these on the board. So Christian Louboutins, super high price, and they had a really high perceived value. And actually mine were quite comfortable. So we decided that the Christian Louboutins were over here. Now looking at this screen, I said to the ladies in the room, and I asked you, where would you like to be on this board? What kind of business do you want to have? How would you want to be able to price your services? Well, everybody agreed that it was better to be over here in what I call the boutique model, right? Over here is low volume, high price. In order to make money, this is the profitable quadrant, the most profitable quadrant of this whole thing. Now, that doesn't mean that's where the most money can be made. In fact, a lot of times you can make a lot more money over here, but over here what we have is a volume model. We have to sell a lot of shoes, right? A lot of Crocs, a lot of Keds, a lot of flip-flops, for example. I didn't use flip-flops as an example, but I forgot that normally I use Havaianas in here as an example, but we'd have to sell a lot of these low price point, high value, high perceived value shoes in order to make up one pair of Christian Louboutins. Now, the reason this relates back to branding is because there's one reason that Christian Louboutins can charge as much as they do for their shoes. And that reason is the red sole. For those of you who aren't familiar, Christian Louboutin has a red sole on the bottom of every pair of shoes. So what makes Christian Louboutin able to charge the prices that they charge for their shoes is one simple thing. It's the red sole. The red sole at the bottom of their shoes. Because they have legally protected this as their intellectual property, Christian Louboutin is the only shoe on the market that can have a red sole with a contrasting black top. In other words, it's the brand that makes Christian Louboutin able to charge the high prices for their shoes. So this is the question for you. What is your red sole? If you want to create an awesome brand, if you want to create a brand that generates more revenues, that's more profitable, then having a red sole, having a unique thing that differentiates you from everyone else is fundamental. And this will allow you to charge more for what you do or what you sell, and it will allow you to have staying power in the marketplace. For as long as Christian Louboutin exists, and for as long as they're the only brand that can have a red sole, they have a much longer chance of being sustainable and being a long-lasting brand than other shoes. So think about, for you, as you're deciding how do you want to build your brand, think what makes you unique and special. A lot of times people, when I ask people, well, what makes you unique and special? They say things like, oh, I have an MBA, or I studied this, or I am able to serve people 24/7. I'm highly responsive, or I deliver really great work, or I do keynote speeches. But none of these things are unique. What's unique is your red sole. Generally, in the world of coaching and speaking and superstars and thought leadership, what makes you unique is a special system or process or way that you've discovered about achieving the results that you achieve, that you can systemize and replicate, and eventually maybe even turn into a whole a whole business of its own, like a certification model or a licensing model. So at the core of developing a personal brand is knowing what your red soul is. And the reason it's important is because it allows you to charge more and stay on the market a lot longer. Are you ready to monetize your magic and find your red soul and learn ways that you can be more sustainable and raise your prices on the market? Then download my Monetize Your Magic playbook. You can get it by clicking the link below, and it's free. And I promise you that it's a game changer. Enjoy.